Okay, hello everybody. This is Jerry from Santa's Switch Adapted Toys. And today what we're going to do is we're going to take a game buzzer. I've got two of them here. One is the Teacher's Choice game buzzer. Move that box out of the way. So the Teacher's Choice game buzzer is the green one. This purple one here is the learning resources. And so there's the names there. We're going to take those buttons and we're going to stop them from being game buttons, and they're now going to be a switch for a switch adapted toy. We're going to defeat the game purposes of it. We're going to add this cable to it. I've already done one, so we're going to open that up to show you what the components were, but we're going to actually do this we're going to do the Teacher's Choice button for you today. And so what we need for that is the game buttons. We're going to need some wire strippers, and I've got a couple of different pair here. I'm going to use that X-Acto knife, this zip tie. This is off of something else, but we're only going to use a short section of that, so this is going to be fine. And we also have a stereo extension, a 3.5 millimeter stereo extension cable, which I picked up from cnaweb.com. And to make sure that we do it right, we have a switch adapted toy. So this is my little puppy, and we will be putting him into service here shortly. The other orange box back there is, I'll show you that in a moment. It's a little box that I created so that I can make my switches, many of my switches, and you can see one back there. There's a little circle memory toy that I make, and I used a stereo feature of the cables. Today we're going to use the mono. We're going to do something to make mono. We only need two, but my button tester back there actually allows me to test stereo. So we're going to set the camera up on a tripod, kind of get it focused on some things here. Real quick, just because I want to demonstrate. When a button is pushed, this one is going to light up two lights. And the reason for that is because I have wired the button to be a mono, so I use both the left and the right on the system. And so both the lights are going to light up. And when we're done, the Teacher's Choice button is going to do the exact same thing. For most switch adapted toys, that's all you need. You just need a single function. But we're going to fix it up so that you've got, show you how to do the wiring to do that. So let's get the bag opened up here. I always buy the extensions rather than try to make up something, because we're going to cut off a few inches of this, get rid of it. I don't want to cut it short, because that, by leaving it long, will be used later in a toy. So that goes into the toy, goes to the side. We're going to strip this back. You don't have to get very much of this, so using the large hole on the stripper. The reason I like to buy these from CNA Web is because these are nice wires. They're easy to deal with when you get to the inside of the sheathing, and I have learned you might want to wring these out. There's a way of doing that to make sure that the tip is separated when you're looking at a system here. We've got it there. It's made up of three parts: the tip, the ring, and the sleeve. So on these particular cables, regardless of what colors might be in here also, the red is always the tip. And the yellow and the gray in this case may be the ring or the sleeve, or it may be reversed. It may be, yellow is the ring and gray is the sleeve. But I've always found that the red is the tip. And we're going to expose that a little bit. You don't want to cut the wire, so we're just going to pinch it and expose some of the wire. On this one here, if I put two of them in here together, it does a nice job of exposing the wire. I should have started up my soldering iron. We're going to need one of those in order to do this. I didn't plug it in yet, but now it is. Let that warm up. While that's warming up, we're going to set the cable aside. Let's move these components aside, and we're going to get inside of this switch, this game. It comes with these little pads on it. I've already taken those off. In this case, I only need to remove 2 screws because I've already opened it up. And we're going to understand what part of this we need and what part we don't need. One of the things that I like to do when I modify these also, I'm going to open up the battery box. Oops. We're going to open up the battery box. We don't want somebody accidentally putting batteries in it. I'm going to remove those springs. We'll do that in a moment here. So we've got these components. We're moving the housing and the big button aside. And now we have this. And I got to get the light on this so that you can see what we're looking at here. The only thing we need out of this whole electronic circuit board is that button in the middle. That button is what's going to activate the toy. So we need to be able to attach our wiring to it. Fortunately, on the Teacher's Choice buttons, they already have a hole in it. You don't have to drill a hole. On the Learning Resources, you need to drill a hole into the side. You can do that with a drill bit, punch it through with an X-Acto knife, whichever your choice is. But in preparing this, knowing that the only thing we need out of this circuit is that switch in the middle, and that's also the only thing we want. And the way these circuits are wired up, there's some interference that could occur if you don't isolate the switch from the brain. In this case, the brain on this one is the circuit that's on here. So we need to actually cut some of these printed circuits on the board to remove this component from the switch. And to do that, I'm not sure, I'm going to try and hold this up and see if we can focus on it, get some light. The camera is not focusing. But I know from experience, and I have to look at it later and see if it shows up on here, between this component and the switch, you can see 2 very thin wires or circuits that are connecting it. And we're going to actually separate that by scratching those out. So I'm going to use the X-Acto knife, and I'm going to scratch that so that I know that there's nothing, no electricity going to flow through there when we energize our switch and switch it over. Again, this game is never going to be used as a game again. It's only going to be used as a switch. I want to remove the possibility of batteries being put into it because that would interfere with the system. We don't need the speaker, so I'm going to clip the wires for the speaker. We could remove the speaker, but it's not necessary. I just remove them so that there's not going to interfere with anything going on later. An advantage to not removing the speaker is on this particular toy, it's helping to support the circuit board. So we'll just leave the speaker there. A couple more things to remove. Wires. I'm going to bend this up. I actually had somebody contact me on one of my adaptions and say, hey, the batteries, there's no way of putting the batteries into the button. And I was confused by what they were asking, because you don't use the batteries in the button, you put the batteries in the toy. So I just completely remove those components, and I push it through from this side. Push it through here. I completely remove them so that there's no accidental energizing of batteries into the switch. Okay, so now that's been done. So we've got the components on the switch that we need. There's 4 wires, 4 legs to all these switches. And we need 2 that are opposite each other. By using 2 that are opposite each other, whether it's these 2 or these 2, we are going to be using the switch as a normally open condition. Right now it's open. Open meaning that there's no electricity can flow through that. No connection can be made until we push it and we close the switch. Closing it by actually making contact between those two points and sending electricity through it. So we're going to be doing that. We're going to take our wire that we have cut. We've got the I'm going to put some solder. I hope that's in, yeah, that's in frame. It's always best when you're soldering if you can pre-tin it. So I like twisting the wires together. Let me turn my fan on here. I like to twist the wires together and heat them up and get tinning on it. So now you can see that there's some solder actually on that wire. Same thing on the other one. Okay, so now that we've got some solder on there, we're going to run this through the hole. And this is actually pretty simple. All we need to do is to solder this down to opposite legs on that switch. So holding it in position, I'm going to get some solder on here again. Warm it up. Hold it there long enough for the solder to cool. And go to the opposing side. So we don't want the one directly across from it, we want opposite. Get a little solder on our, make that connection, make the solder cool. So, oops, slipped off the table. So the question is, did that little fix work? So we're going to pull the cord up here. I'm going to do one test because I want to make sure that I've got, okay, so I know now that I've got my wiring connect, but just as easily you can connect it up to your toy that's already switch adapted and press the button. So if it's wired correctly, it will activate the toy, and it will also deactivate the toy. So one punch activates it, another punch sends another signal over and cuts the circuit so that the toy stops. Otherwise it'll just continue to run. And there we go. So that toy has been, or that switch has been set up. And we know that if we hadn't have removed the connection to the brain of the toy, to the primary circuitry of the toy would give you see, it would activate and then it wouldn't turn off. You couldn't stop it from running. So you need to make sure that on the circuit board that has been disconnected. So we can then just put that back together, which I won't do here immediately, but by carefully lining things up. Let's see, it's not that way. Put that back together and you now have a functioning button. So let's show you what we have with the Learning Resources toy, or game. And again, I've opened this up, removed those pads so we can gain access to the screws below it. This one has already had the battery, all the battery and wiring removed from it. But let's open this up and find out. It's different. It's different in the fact that this button switch that's on the circuit board doesn't look like the other one, does it? So this is an integrated button that is, instead of being a button added, it is a button that's, got something under it there. It's a button that's made out by a dome-shaped piece of metal that when you press it, the metal itself deflects. The center of that makes contact with the circuit board and it activates the switch. Let's run. So, okay. On here, the main brain, the primary brain on this Learning Resources game is this black circle of what looks like plastic or something that they protected. It's kind of a heat shield for it. But as you can see here, there is from that nice circle of silver all the way around, and then on this side over here, we'll say it's at the 430 spot, you see a strip of silver that goes in. This strip of silver that goes in is what's in the center of the button. The strip of silver on the outside is being contacted by all those little fingers of the dome metal. And you still need to separate these components from the brain. And to do that on this board, all I did was I drilled 2 holes. I drilled one hole in here which isolates it so that this connection is no longer a part of any of these circuits over here. I drilled a second hole over here and I ran my wire, again the red wire, I ran it through up and soldered it. You got to be a little careful on these type of buttons because switches, is because this dome button is held in place by a piece of masking or cellophane tape, clear tape. So you can't really see it there, but you need to make sure that tape is not in your way when you solder your red wire down. I've got on this particular one, the yellow and the gray wire are running over through a hole. It comes up that I drilled here. Some people use this point. The problem I had with this point was it's also, if you look at the back, and I don't know if we see that, it has got a support behind it. So I don't like using that point. By drilling a tiny hole or making contact with it here, I get more surface area to make sure that my solder goes on. You cannot solder through this green material. This green material is a protective layer. So you just solder it. You want to make sure you're down to where you've got nice clean contact. And so that's what that is. And the reason they left it is clean contact. is because no matter where they put this dome button, they want to make sure that it can reach out and make a contact with the center point. In fact, okay, let me go ahead and take that button off so that we can see. I got to turn off my little toy. So we can see what's going on here in the center. There's the two components. Once contact is made between this inner and the outer, that switch is activated and it's going to close the circuit. So that's all that needs done. So that's all we need on this button in order to make it a switch adapted button. Separate the brain, get it out of the system so that it doesn't accidentally make some strange things going on, and there we go. I also showed you at the beginning of this, I had a zip tie here. What's the zip tie for? These wires are very delicately put onto that circuit board. This is a big hole. This becomes strain relief, and you'll use these on toys. Anytime that you add wiring to a toy, you want to make sure that you have good strain relief so that somebody doesn't accidentally pull it out. Just by putting that on there, tightening it down, remove the excess. Now when you reassemble this, that wire will not pull out. Okay, so there we go. I won't go through the boring part of putting everything back together. I will reassemble these later, but that is how I adapt Teacher's Choice and Learning Resources using a 6.5 stereo, a 6 foot 3.5 millimeter stereo extension cable to activate switch adapted toys. Thank you.